Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden, and we're here for a bonus segment.
This is a bonus round.
Round.
Our guest is John Barnes,
Hello.
Democratic Party candidate for State Senate, District 32. John, we were talking at the end of the segment, pick up where we were. We were talking about federal government getting money in from the federal government.
Sure.
Well, and before, what's your contact info? Sorry.
Absolutely. JohnBarnes.us is the website, johnbarnes.us. My cell phone number is 317-489-2064.
And what's your shirt say?
Sons of the American Legion.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, we talked before about stigmas. We have a governor who said that the money that was being distributed at the time Obama came into office was funny money. So this funny money. Mm-hmm. And then he took the money to be able to balance the budget.
Yeah, no, we're talking about a governor who was financial director in the first term of George W. Bush.
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm just saying the double speak of taking the money and at the same time saying, ooh, this is, I mean, if you really think it's funny money, give it back. And if you don't, then take it. But don't do both at the same time. That's what scares me. But I do think we need to do more in partnership with D.C., but we need to not only get our fair share back, but also have some say about how that money is going to be used. There are a lot of things I don't think we're taking advantage of just for that exact same reason. People are worried, we're cooperating with the feds. I don't know about that.
Well, one thing that's going to come up under the next governor is the issue of the one part the Supreme Court struck down in the Affordable Care Act was the expansion of Medicaid. Mm-hmm. That states did not have to expand Medicaid, but they could if they want to. So is that something just the governor decides, or is that something the legislature has a role in? Well, and should we?
I think
talking about 90% of the dollars would come from the federal government.
I think there ought to be more direction across the board, simply because if you live in a democracy, that was one of the surprising things to me when I was in the House of Representatives. Even after being a government teacher, I didn't realize that, boy, you pass the budget and then the governor can adjust it all these different ways, and you're thinking, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And I
didn't realize that.
It's the same kind of thing when you're talking about Medicaid. It would be nice if there were some legislative input. Mm-hmm. But I think what is even more interesting right now is listening to Pence and Gregg and Rupert, for that matter, not be real specific. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why, we don't just, wait a little longer to talk about that until we figure out who the new governor is going to be. But I think it's important to have more of a say. Yeah.
Well, the feds have a lot of money for highways, for example. We need highway work here in the state of Indiana. So how do we go about dragging that money in?
Well, I think, again, it's a question of working through our federal representatives. It's a question of seeing what kind of grants might be available, what kind of projects in terms of partnership.
And a lot of it's matching money, too.
Matching
money.
They
just don't give you the money. You got to put your own money.
Right. But again, that's symptomatic of the partisanship we have right now. People working together, that just doesn't seem to happen very much anymore. So
no, it doesn't. Although I know that one candidate in the United States Senate, Richard Murdoch, has made a point of saying,
likes to mispronounce the name.
Well, Murdoch. He's made a point of saying that he wants to work and be bipartisan. He's been saying that lately.
One of the issues that the Star, I think it was last Sunday, did an article on was the coal gasification plant on the east side, and I found it interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're locking in natural gas prices to like $6.50 per BTU per British thermal unit.
He knows what it is.
That's awesome right there.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to say Bachman-Turner or Underdrive or something.
If the price goes above and we make money, then we share 50% of the profit with this company. But if it goes below and we lose money, the taxpayers are on the hook for 100%.
Well, and I think there's so many questions right now about utility regulation to begin with. I mean, that's one of those issues, again, that I wish the current senator in my district would ask more questions about. There's so much, it seems to be, good old boy stuff that goes in there, and then you start to look at campaign finance and stuff like that, and you're like, there's just not enough questions being asked.
Well, then shouldn't there be more? Shouldn't there be a statute or some type of constitutional provision limiting the governor's autonomy or his discretion to spend money as he wishes? I mean, I thought that, I was under the impression that the legislature, even though it was a General Assembly that proposed that the number for pi be 3.2 at one time, still should be a better check on the budget.
They ought to have more oversight.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's something that's especially...
Well, Indiana, though, actually has one of the weakest governors in the country because he doesn't have line-item veto. His veto can be overridden by a simple majority, and that puts us in a very, very small class of states.
But at the same time, if you give him all this latitude on what he can do with the money, it's like saying, well, that bank that we're putting money in that building, and the guy inside can't say what color it is or what kind of doors he's going to put on it or windows, but he gets to say what he's going to do with all the money that we're putting in.
And, we were talking about energy. We were talking about things like that. And I think the other thing that is also interesting is when you start to get this partisanship about renewable energy and this stereotype, green energy, well, that's a liberal thing. And, coal and natural gas, that's a conservative thing. And it's like there are so many, you talk about federal money, there's so many opportunities for energy innovation. I'm not as worried about how it's going to work out in terms of wind power. If we can bring more jobs to the state of Indiana through developing that, and if our wind turbines are coming up from the Ohio River because they've been shipped in from Denmark, and we're not making them here.
Well, not only that, we're not making them here, but they're owned by consortia of companies from Belgium.
Right.
And so all we're providing is the wind, and we don't even get the benefit.
Well, wouldn't those windmills work better though if they put like a little motor on them and made it spin faster?
You weren't an engineering major.
No,
wow.
No, I wasn't.
Neither was
I went to
I.
Ball State.
No, I just think it's interesting. I mean, you talk about jobs. I mean, in my district, what Amtrak's operating like 10%. There's all this facility there they could use to build those there. Navistar, same thing. The engineers have told me that, but we're not working to convert that so we could actually make those here.
Isn't part of the problem with Amtrak is the condition of the tracks are so poor?
There's probably...
You take Amtrak to Chicago, you get it up in the Chicago area, including it northwest part of Indiana.
The region.
They have to go, the region.
It's the region.
The region. And they have to go so slow because the tracks are just...
Right.
Well, wait, they go slowly for two reasons. One is because of the condition of the tracks. The other is because of the traffic from the other trains up there. So they have to stop and wait for other trains to go through. The problem with the condition of the tracks is that passenger trains are much lighter than freight trains. And when freight trains use the same tracks as passenger trains, they put a lot more wear on those tracks. So European rail systems have independent rail systems. Passenger trains run on passenger rails, freight trains run on freight rails. And so you don't have the same problems there. Now, here, if we did that, you could have, we took the bullet train from New York up to Boston, and that went 120, 130 miles per hour. We were rattling right along. By contrast, we went out to Seattle, and we slowed in some places. Now, the track between here and Chicago is fairly decent, but they run freight on it. And so you only get up to about 60 miles, 65 miles per hour on that train. We could have bullet trains running all over the place that would carry a lot of people much more cheaply than cars can. People would maybe pay more in taxes than they do, but they'd have a lot less money that they'd have to pay out. They might not have to own a car. I didn't own a car in Chicago. Nobody that I knew owned a car because it cost as much to park one in a garage as to have an apartment, and you could get any place you needed to go with mass transit.
So what other issues are going to be happening in the next legislative session?
Well, I think the next legislative session, we're going to be talking about a lot of things. You guys had talked before, I think, about early childhood education. That's going to be huge.
Yeah.
One of the things that really disturbs me is there are a lot of people who are talking about how we have full-day kindergarten now. We don't. We have more money placed towards it, but there are a lot of school districts, Franklin Township, for instance, where they have to decide. Half of the kids are going to get it and half are not. And so the kids who are more at risk, shall we say, versus maybe gifted and talented kids that are being separated out. They're going to get full day, the others are not, and the parents are like, well, wait a minute, what? I think that's the sad part, is that we've got to front-end load education because that's the most economical way to do it.
Well, and Cardinal Newman said, give me a child at the age of 5 and he's mine for life. And another aspect of it is, if you look at the other countries with whom we are in competition economically, they all have early childhood education. And that's a hallmark of being able to get a kid a head start on things.
Front-end load.
Well, and the conservative complaint is that these kids are going to kindergarten, they're not really learning that much, or just become babysitters.
Well, but I disagree. When you're talking about standards, trust me, kindergarten is much different than it used to be. They are pushing a lot more of the basic education that we used to see in first grade in kindergarten. And if they get to first grade without having that stuff, even though in Indiana we still don't require kindergarten, that becomes a challenge. They're already behind.
When I went to Just a Wee School, that was the name of my kid. I mean, that gave me.
Was that like before?
Do you remember your
Civil
teacher?
War, or?
Yeah, it was before Civil War.
Okay.
Do you remember the name of the teacher?
Yes.
Do you really?
Yes, but since I went through witness protection, I can't really. People would be able to trace me back that way. But I had a big jump on other kids just in terms of social skills. I went to a rural high school and rural school system.
Sure.
And so by having gone to a kindergarten, you learn how to deal with other kids.
And that's one of the things that it also, you talk about priorities, the whole push towards internet schools. I understand the idea of doing classes online. I understand that. But to not have that socialization, which I think is a big part of a child's education, that disturbs I'm not sure if it's going to have a rounded education.
And him calling the college, I'm concerned too if we went strictly to internet. I know you have strong opinions on it.
Oh, I have very strong opinions.
He has strong opinions?
Yes. Usually wrong, but on this one he's right.
But, I mean, there are certain things that you gain by being able to talk to a professor, to engage in discourse with other students, male and female, whereas, like, there are some schools you don't have that opportunity.
Right.
Their educational opportunities are limited. But when you go to a college that's co-educational, you are able to deal with other people in class.
I think he's referring to your sorted background. It's a
Wabash.
Wabash.
Yeah, those
It's
2
a
years
Wabash.
of Wabash. I understand.
Right.
But,
Yep.
But when you're there in college and you're able to talk about things, it's much more different than going online and just reading something on computer. And also, you're socializing with people at a very important time in your life in college.
Right.
Because that's the time when you're really becoming an adult.
So,
And I'm surprised Paul didn't throw in, and that's when you do all these sordid things.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And
I thought he was going to say, when did you finally become an adult? That's what I was
I think
really. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I think there was some sordid activity by you at DePaul University that you barely got out of that school.
No, they threw me out of there. They said, "Okay,
you barely got out
of the diploma. Get out." But there are things about education that I think that you cannot get simply online. There are social aspects, and I think that I can understand. Yeah, we are in a computer age. I think that kids have to be provided with computer education, or else they're not going to be able to function in daily life in the home. Much less be able to compete in the market.
Well, and I just think at a time when we don't have enough money for education, the state's been throwing an unusually large amount of money in that direction, and I'm just like, we still rate schools in terms of count days and how many kids are showing up. These are schools where kids don't have to show up. So I'm like, wow, how does that work?
So, I believe we're at the
okay, this is the last end. This is the last end. This is the end.
the last we're going to see of John Barnes.
Unless I can talk him into another one.
John, thanks for coming on.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you for the Village Cigar for letting us shoot here today. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
Paul Ogden.
We'll see you next week. Civil Discourse Now, and our audience is